Well, good evening, everybody. I think we've got about 15 people in there now. Yep, just somebody messaging saying, should I be hearing sound now? Yes, you now should be hearing sound. So if you can hear me, I guess, well, most of you have got your videos turned off, but Delphine, if you can just give us a thumbs up or a nod because I can see your face. Fantastic. Right, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Mark. Quick introduction, I guess, as I just keep letting people in. I'm always just conscious that people are going to join 1 or 2 minutes after we start. So forgive me if I keep just diverting to let people join as we start up tonight. Yeah, my name's Mark. You may know me from F1 in Schools. You may be thinking Tim's got older and uglier pretty quickly if you've met my colleague Tim before. I just want to say a massive thank you for everyone for joining in tonight. It's been a really, really good response to this in terms of signups. So the real reason for doing this, obviously, the F1 in Schools primary class is a new project in some senses. In other ways, it's a remodeled version of something which you may know and love as the Jaguar Primary School Challenge. So really tonight, it's about me hopefully just helping you guys out with some questions and answers and making sure that we're all pulling in the same direction for the new season. So I thought what we'd do first of all is just a quick update through the new season, through the sort of important bullet points, as it were, things that you may have already picked up, things that you may not have read, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I am going to give you folks a chance to ask questions either through the chat, if you want to do so, as we're going through the webinar tonight. And there's also a way of raising your hand if anyone can work out how to do that through Zoom as well. I don't mean literally on the video, but you can do that as well if you want. And there's a good chance that I might see you somewhere on the side raising your hand. So if you've got a question, feel free to pop it in the chat or tell Zoom that you want to put your hand up. But I will give you a chance to sort of dip in later on. So I will introduce, first of all, what is kind of new for this season. And I'll do so just through the screen share for now. So away we go. First things first, and I think you've probably all read them and seen them. There is a new rule book which you can pick up from the f1inschools.co.uk website. It'll be quite a fresh look for those of you that have done the Jaguar Primary School Challenge beforehand. If anyone's joining us tonight who has no idea what I'm talking about with referring to the Jaguar Primary School Challenge, this is essentially what this competition was up until March 2020, when the sponsorship that was arranged through Jaguar Land Rover was ended, and it was all partly to do with COVID, but we have remodeled and sort of revised what was a Jaguar Primary School Challenge into now what is the F1 in Schools primary class. So it's essentially brought into the family. So there's a new rule book, the competition guidebook, which is out there for everyone to download. It's obviously free to download. The idea of that is it's a sort of one-stop shop for yourself and your students to be able to work through. Explains all of the sort of rules of the competition. It includes the scorecards, which we'll go into a little bit of detail about, because I know a few of you had questions just about the exact details about the scorecards. So yeah, they are out on the website. Go and grab them now. We've obviously had this kind of ongoing cat and mouse thing with our good friends, the government and COVID, with relation to the dates for the season. So we originally obviously wanted to try and hold the season from March onwards. We've had to shift it back. So now the deadlines for the project are as follows. The submission deadline is the 14th of June, and that is for the portfolio, the verbal presentation, and a car. Now, that might all sound, again, a bit kind of out there and a bit confusing if you've never done this before. Basically, that is the date at which the projects need to be completed. So without worrying too much about the specifics of what has to be done, that is essentially your submission deadline to F1 in Schools for this year's project work. Now, it depends what situation people are in, but that, I think, even if you were going to leave from tonight and go, right, let's give this a go this year and let's dip our toe in, the 14th of June is achievable. I think for the amount of work that you would reasonably need to do to get involved in the competition, it's a doable thing. I wouldn't try and lead you on any other way, but obviously we're still kind of hanging on just to know absolutely when we're going to be back and at full steam in schools. But anyway, submission deadline, 14th of June. We're then going to conduct racing behind closed doors. So the F1 in Schools team are going to film and race the cars behind closed doors, but in a sort of live event broadcast style, so that we're gonna broadcast the whole thing, including the awards show, on the 19th of June, which I believe is Saturday. Now, the next thing to mention, there are a new set of chassis packs, which are the primary class official chassis for the car. These are available from Denford. They start from £25, and that is essentially, see that as your kind of basic minimum financial contribution, well, financial commitment to getting involved. Getting the car chassis packs to start with. After that, pretty much the competition can be done for the price of your consumables. There isn't a registration fee, for example. It's then just a case of getting to an event, I guess, in a regular season. But this year, obviously, it would just be posting off your car to us at F1 in Schools HQ. So the chassis pack, which we can go into a bit more detail later on, but the chassis pack, it starts at 25 quid, and that'll sort you out with 5 cars worth. And a lot of those components are actually reusable, so you wouldn't need necessarily to spend that every year. So it's a bit of an initial investment. There are bigger options and more equipment options too, but it's not really a sales pitch tonight, so we'll leave it there for now. Project elements to complete then. So this is what you're looking at actually producing this season. Now, this will be slightly different for people who've experienced the Jaguar Primary School Challenge in the past, more in line with people who are perhaps familiar with the F1 in Schools entry class, which is, again, something I'll explain. There were a couple of questions about people wanting to know what on earth all these terms are that we keep throwing out there. And fair enough it is too. So the project elements to complete for the 14th of June, one manufactured car, and that's predominantly made from cardboard, and it's normally a sort of 160 GSM regular modeling card, essentially. White card as opposed to brown corrugated card, of course. So one manufactured car using the standard chassis, the standard wheels, which are all available in this primary class chassis pack, and obviously designed and made to the team's designs and specifications. One e-portfolio, so that's submitted really as a PDF file. It can be made in PowerPoint, it can be made in Word, it can be made in Publisher, it can be made from photographing, hand-drawn portfolio pages and turning that into a PDF. It's a 5-page document, and that is to be submitted digitally with a video verbal presentation, which is this year's version, I guess, of the live sort of Dragon's Den style pitch, which the teams do at an event. So these two pieces of work together form the content that is judged by the scorecards. We will go into a bit more detail later on, but this is literally just the need to knows. I'm looking at doing a car, a portfolio, and a video verbal presentation for the 14th of June to be in the competition this year. And it will be the same in obviously future years, with it not being an e-portfolio or a video when we get back to being a physical event. One in red for the bottom there. Now, this is for people who are perhaps, again, aware of how things used to be with the Jaguar Primary School Challenge. The pit display, or the pit garage display, is an optional extra. I'll go into a bit more detail about the thinking behind all this, but it's now not assessed with the scorecard. So it's still there as an item to be able to do with the team and to bring along to the event. It's going to be assessed from the judges for an award only. So it's now not part of the official scorecard setup. In many ways, it kind of takes the pressure off the team, and that is our main motivation really behind taking pressure off the teams and off the teachers to sort of, to make sure that expense and time are spent, perfecting the pit displays. Obviously, we see it as a big part of the event when we get there visually, but we just thought we'd take the pressure off it in terms of assessment. Now then, one for the context here. So again, referring back to how things were with the Jaguar Primary School Challenge, if you're coming to this fresh, this little bit will perhaps mean not much to you, but bear with me. I just put a little graphic together just to show sort of how things have developed. So this is what the old car kind of template, I guess, looked like from sort of plan view. Quite a sort of narrow, thin body with skinny dragster style wheels, and they had these CO2 canisters at the bottom. So a couple of things to point out. The cars were largely wingless. The regulations didn't sort of stipulate that they needed to have wings or aerodynamic devices as such. So they were very much kind of pencil style drag racers. Again, like I said, the skinny wheels, super narrow, super efficient for the job in hand. And obviously drag racers do have these really skinny front wheels for minimal rolling resistance, but they're not particularly F1-ish. Obviously F1 cars have chunky tires front and back. Yes, you might say that's for cornering, traction and grip. Yes, but we're F1 in schools, so the skinny wheels are not particularly F1-ish. The cars were also not governed by minimum weight, so we never had a stipulation in to say that the cars must be above a certain weight, which of course affects the performance. And of course, again, in F1 is a real crucial thing that cars have to work to a minimum weight. Again, the body of the car and the chassis, which was a standard design, albeit a design that was given to teams to cut out themselves, either by hand or on their CNC cutters, was a kind of box section chassis. So there wasn't a change in profile between the front and the back, which led to this sort of quite square, well, quite oblong rather, kind of dragster shape. Again, quite easy to make, a few folds, a few tucks, but again, not massively F1. Now, 4 grams of CO2, those people that have been to a Jaguar Primary School Challenge event in the past will know that that is plenty. And that sends these cars down the track in a roundabout, in fact, probably just less than a second. So in terms of a power pack, we were already punching on some serious power. So skip forward to the new rules. We've brought in mandatory front and rear wings. Now, that isn't something to be terrified about. That's just a stipulation to say that the car should have something that resembles a front wing and a rear wing. We're not going to go into the sort of the levels of the F1 in schools secondary classes where you're having to have minimum thicknesses, minimum dimensions in all sorts of other ways. It's pretty straightforward in that we just want the cars to have front and rear wings. And it's something for the teams to think about, you know, how do we create a device at the front that maybe deflects air around these big tires? What can we do to make that happen? And the same at the back. So a front and rear wing are now part of the rules. We've expanded the skinny wheels into the wider wheels. These are our official F1 in schools F1 spec wheels, and they come with the primary chassis kit that you can get from Denford, which I mentioned before. There's a 40 gram minimum weight to the cars now. That will be judged ultimately with I will say a tolerance. I won't say it'll be massively lenient, but it will be judged with a tolerance and a bit of understanding. But in terms of thinking about how you might encourage the teams and the students to think about this, a decent set of kitchen scales can do this job. So a decent set of digital scales that you can pick up for a £5 would be more than adequate to make sure that you were around about that 40 gram limit. So this is now a consideration, and these are all things which, you know, you as a teacher can be thinking, right, how do I explain this to the teams? These are all really relevant features to not just a racing car in general, but specifically an F1 car. So now that we're sort of putting ourselves under the header of F1 in schools, these are all quite nice little things to sort of bring in examples from the real world, show the exemplar how a real F1 car looks and works, and then go, right, that's what we're now doing to our car, and this is what we've got to think about, and these are the ways we're going to think about implementing them. We've also got this slightly more F1 shaped chassis, which you can see sort of tucks in for the nose. So in a real F1 car, obviously this bulky section is for the driver, for the radiators, which cool the engine, and then the engine itself, where the front is pretty much just for the driver's legs and the front suspension. So this shape now is going to be our standard chassis shape. That as a component is part of that primary chassis kit, which you can buy from Denford. So that as an item comes ready stamped, ready printed with a set of instructions. I'll show you a picture of it in a second. And that's a component which the teams can assemble themselves, but won't need to manufacture in the same way that they would have done previously with the with a little cutter plotter. As with before, the 4 gram CO2 is still plenty fast enough. So we're going to leave that as it is, and that is powering the cars down the track. You as a school don't need to worry about sourcing these at all. They're provided for you at the event themselves. So you've just got to think about getting that car ready to race, minimum weight with its wings, and the rest of it will come as part of the pack. Righty. So just to sort of expand then on what is now the kind of standard design. So this is a sort of planned cutout view of the chassis net. So you can see it's all pre-printed with some instructions on, with a couple of numbered tabs, and then a little instruction list down here. We've also gone to the trouble of putting a couple of videos together. Somebody did ask a question actually about videos. I'll mention it later, but there are some videos showing how to assemble this chassis, which you could work through with your students as well. So this comes as a standard part, and this is how, with the little engine housing component as well, which looks after your CO2 canister, that is how the sort of base car will look before you add your aerodynamic body to that. I guess probably the big change from the Jaguar Primary School Challenge is to get to this stage, the team would have been making, cutting, using CAD and CNC in some cases to make the chassis. What we took the view of is that the body itself that goes over the top of this can, if you want as a teacher to bring it into your project, that can be the CNC CAD design part. So rather than duplicate the task and have them do a CAD CNC chassis and then another CAD CNC body, we just wanted you to put all the effort and the sort of the time and learning of the CNC side of stuff into the body. You can be, it's completely your call, and you can say, look, we're just going to do it by hand. We're going to draw the net. We're going to cut it out ourselves with scissors or craft knives or modeling equipment. That is totally your call. But as a stock thing, that is now how the car will look. With the kit as well, what you'll get is an example F1 style body, which it's there to serve as an example, not as something to turn up to race day with. But this white net that you see now over the top of the body is a kind of like a gold star example of what we want the teams to try and aim for ultimately. So I guess you could look at it and say, well, what we want to try and do is hide that chassis, that carbon fiber, that dark grey coloured chassis as much as we can, because that is the kind of the innards of the car. That's the bit we want to try and cover with our aerodynamic surface. We're not saying that this is the best design out there, and we're not saying this is quick, but this is just an example of how you kind of make it look a bit more like an F1 car with some wings front and rear. So that's, like I said, that's all part of the kit. And actually you do get these example nets with the kit as well. So you can use them. You could even, do some demo cars first of all, make them look like this, and even get the kids to start thinking about adding designs and liveries to that as well. Just to then show you what the kit looks like, this is pretty much how it comes. So this is your starter kit. So to make your way in F1 in Schools primary class, this is what you'll have to get yourself a hold of. So that's the chassis net there. There are your body nets that I just referred to. And this bit here is the engine housing nets as well. So if we just skip back, it's this part here, which houses the CO2 canister. So all in all, that is everything you'll need to produce your rolling chassis. And then it's the design and make task of the body itself. I'm hoping this is all clear up to now. If anyone's got any questions, I've got the chat open in a separate window. So if you want to just fire a question in there, I'll try and reply to them as well. But all things being well, that so far is fairly straightforward. Now, question time live. The idea here is you guys and girls submitted me some questions. So I'm going to try and answer them now in a logical sequence. Before I do that, I'm going to answer Sarah's question. Hi, Sarah. Sarah's asked, can you buy any of the packs separately? That is going to be a question for our colleagues at Denford, but I think the answer to that is yes, and I'm pretty sure it is. Let me just go back to the picture so we can sort of put that into a bit more context. So yeah, all the elements individually will be available. I think what you'll probably find is that things like the wheels, the axles, all these little pieces down here, which are part of the sort of wheel systems, these will be available in bulk. So for example, you might get a bag of 100 wheels. That would last you probably forever, because you could even recycle these wheels, recycle the hard components like your axles, your little plastic bushes. Things like the paper consumables, they're probably the things you're going to want to bulk up on. And again, they will come in bulk packs. So you could, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think my colleagues from Denford could probably advise. I think it's around about 50 per set. In fact, I believe the Reds actually have a couple of my colleagues in the call at the moment. If Julia or Ozzy, if you want to just put in the chat what the details are there, and I can make sure that everyone knows the answer to that. Just about how many nets that people can get hold of if they wanted to replenish, say, the chassis or the body consumables kits. Right, while we wait for that, I will move on. So yeah, you can get hold of other bits and bobs. People are saying, yeah, we've got tons of wheels, axles, bushes, not the other bits yet. But again, everything will come separately, so it'll just be a case of sort of topping up when you need them. Right, your questions. There were a few questions, and rightly so, about what on earth the differences between all these different terms are. So we've got entry class, primary STEM project, primary class, primary challenge, primary competition. So we're brilliant at confusing people. That's one thing I will say. We're great at coming up with all these different terms for stuff and then expecting people just to go, oh yeah, of course, that's what they mean. Let me try and demystify. Entry class, there shouldn't be any mentions to entry class. That is a funny one, because I think somebody said, yeah, there's an entry class mention in the primary guidebook. Entry class is our first step on the ladder for secondary schools. So entry class is for age 11 to 14. It's not part of the primary class. It's a CNC or a handmade resistant materials project, essentially. So entry class is a sort of step 2, if you like, after primary class. The primary STEM project, this has actually been around for longer than what is now the F1 in Schools primary class, in that it's a classroom project which is a Denford product. It's not an F1 in Schools product as such, but it's designed to be a sort of ideal precursor to entering F1 in Schools primary class. So the thinking behind the STEM project is that you can, as a classroom teacher, you can guide your students through, I think there are 6 units of work, and it's intended to be a half term's worth of project work, which leads up to a sort of mini in-class race with a shorter 10-meter track, which isn't powered by the compressed cartridges, but it's powered by a bike pump and a little custom-built launcher. So the idea is that your students can get to grips with the idea of being in a team, doing the F1 in School style project, but in a little more sort of manageable, safer, ideally way in schools. The idea being that you can maybe take your top team or teams from that and go, right, let's build on what we've done here and bring it through to the F1 in Schools primary class competition, which is then external. So it's the kind of difference between the internal and the external. But if you wanted any more details on the primary STEM project, that is out there. It's a Denford product. I think there's a link to it on the Denford website. I'll send a link around to all this stuff at the end of this when I sum up, and I'll send you an email. I'll include all these useful little links in there. Right, just a quick note on the chat. Yeah, thanks, Ozzy. So chassis nets, engine housing nets, and the body nets all come in packs of 50. So again, once you've got that, you're going to be happy for quite a while to come. I mean, you could do that as a full class activity, get 1 per student. You could use them a couple of years, and that would do you for 5 or 10 years probably. So yeah, there's options there. Right, the next question down then from you folks was, can we see an example portfolio? Tricky one. The honest answer at the moment is no. And the reasons for that twofold. One, this is the first year of the competition. So rather than sharing a Jaguar Primary School Challenge portfolio and sort of saying this is kind of similar, it would be from sort of next year onwards. My hesitation with this, and this is from having been a teacher and kind of gone through this myself on your side, is that as soon as we start sharing example portfolios with students, it just becomes the target. And in many ways, we don't want F1 in Schools to become, a sort of tick box competition where it's like, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? Have you written that there? Have you put this on this page? We want to see a team's individual response. I realise that is not very helpful in terms of sharing exemplar teaching materials, but for the time being, the answer is a no, not yet. But it's not a definite no that we won't share that with teachers, just for sort of awareness. What I would say is that we've got, and I'll just quickly pop it up on screen, is the competition guidebook is intended to try and break down what's required by the portfolio. I'm not actually sure that that's sharing my screen anymore. Is anybody, just give me a quick thumbs up if anyone can see the competition guidebook. Yeah? Oh, wicked. Excellent. Thank you. I've got like a little panel of 4 people here. It's brilliant. I've got Sarah, Richard, Delphine, and Derfel just going, yes, excellent. You're like my little advisory panel. So yeah, this part of the, nope, wrong one, back one. There we go. So this part of the guidebook is kind of your exemplar. This is what we're looking for bit. So while it's not an actual portfolio, it's kind of what we want to see. And what we want the students to think about doing. It's not a huge stretch to go from this to then see what's in the scorecard, but this is designed to be there in place of an exemplar portfolio, which we didn't want teams and teachers to sort of fixate on and say, right, this is what we're trying to aim for, because ultimately there's always a better example than the exemplar. So let's not limit ourselves. So that was a particularly unhelpful answer probably to that question. How has the competition changed? Yeah, I guess the competition's changed in a few ways. I think the fundamental thing to say is it is the same competition. Let's think about it in that way. It's a tweaked version of what was the Jaguar Primary School Challenge. The main difference is, I guess, the removal of the pit display as a scorecard. Like I mentioned earlier, it's about making what we want now the F1 in Schools primary class to be in terms of being accessible for more people. I think those of you that did the Jaguar Primary School Challenge will probably sort of be going, well, it was fine. Why leave it in? but we ultimately want more people to look at this and go, yeah, go on, we'll give it a punt. And by sort of bringing back the barriers and knocking down the entry requirements, it will probably give us a chance to get more people involved in this, which ultimately is for the benefit of the competition itself. So yeah, we've if anything, we've probably simplified the scorecards. We've taken some of the sort of complicated terminology out of it. We've made it a little bit more open in terms of interpretation. And what that hopefully will do is, like I said, it will allow people to the competition outcomes to pretty much differentiate by outcome. It's going to be based on experience. It's going to be based on teacher and student input. When you come together at an event, that's kind of when the magic happens, and that's when people sort of start going, oh, that's what we could have done, or what, that's a great idea, or go, actually, yeah, we're pretty good here. We're looking better than the competition. So we want to preserve that little bit of magic where you turn up to a competition and there is a variance in the level. So really, again, it's a case of we've just tried to break down the barriers a bit and make it a bit less stipulative almost. Is that even a word? It is now. We sort of read through the old rule book, and it read very, very technically and almost very, it was a bit too F1 somehow. It was sort of how our old F1 in schools rules used to read 5 or 10 years ago. And we've made it a little bit more kind of, I guess, student friendly. So yeah, the competition, I guess, has changed in some ways, but turning up to an event, it'll feel very familiar. And in terms of the portfolio, the verbal presentation, that side of things, it will feel very familiar in terms of setting your teams out. Yeah, an overview of the new rules and regs, that was asked for. I'll just quickly flash back then to the rules and regs window here. So yeah, this is all new look. That will look very different to you. This bit, I guess, is probably the most different, the technical regulations. Just quick thumbs up if you can see the technical regs, folks, my little advisory panel. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so the tech regs, I guess this is where we've made the most changes in terms of the terminology. A lot of the actual rules are getting at the same thing as previous. So it's the cars must have a standard chassis, the cars must have a standard wheel, etc., etc. There are a few different terminology, things like general safety and performance, and that is sort of almost how to break down what the rules are for. So it's, instead of just having a whole series of rules, just 1 to 10, we've given them a sort of a category. Part of the reason for this is that we do this in the F1 secondary class, so it's trying to sort of make a link between what we do here and what they'll hopefully move into at secondary level. Someone's just put, yeah, pit display. Oh, it's great. But yeah, you're right. Happy not to do the pit display. Yeah, pit display. Maybe we did make the right decision after all with that. But yeah, the tech regs, I guess, is probably somewhere to focus if you're looking for the changes in the competition, because ultimately you're turning up with a car that's designed to a set of rules. So this will be at the center of what you do, from research through to presenting, etc., etc. The whole guidebook is kind of geared to explain what this is all about. We do put a bit in about wings, giving the teams some wing terminology. We're not going to test them on it, but it's just a nice little bit of more aero F1 relevant, research, I guess, to sort of drip in there and to start trying to make them think about. So flashing back then, yeah, simplified scorecards. There are literally 2 of them now. So where we did have, and I'll just show you the old version of the rules. We had the portfolio and pit display, which was, crikey, isn't like that, is it? Try again. We had portfolio and pit display on one scorecard. We had verbal presentation marked in 3 different ways. We had engineering marked in all these ways. And then specifications, which is what the scrutineers at the event look at. We've now got a much simpler, whoop, sorry if anyone's just gone dizzy. Scrutineering scorecard, that's for the judges to use at the event when they check the cars off. And then literally just a design and engineering portfolio scorecard, which includes team identity and graphic identity, which I guess is where the pit display would have really come to the fore in terms of showing off the team's brand. So that can now be sort of demonstrated through the portfolio. And then the verbal presentation, we've made that a little bit simpler again, and a lot of the verbal presentation is down to interpretation. I think with some of the best verbal presentations we've seen have been just completely off the wall. Teams entering the room in dance, for example, that kind of thing. So I think the less we govern the verbal, the better in some ways. So yeah, simplified scorecards and tech regs. There's a little bit less to them as well. There were more tech regs in the old style JPSC rulebook. Like I said before, we've gone in a more F1 style direction with the design, which kind of just helps out really with you trying to sell the concept to your students, hopefully. Right, last question then was, what helpful videos are available from F1 in Schools or ESW? For those that don't know, ESW, Engineering Education Scheme Wales. Definitely got that right, didn't I? I think it is. Yeah, ESW. So essentially, ESW are our colleagues in Wales who help us deliver F1 in Schools. So if you are sitting in Wales watching through this, you will be contacting ESW rather than ourselves for probably the most of the competition. In terms of videos and what we've got out there, the place to go at the moment will be our YouTube channel. So this being probably the first place to go. We've put a few resources in there which will be helpful. First of all, some sketching tutorials, so how to sketch the body and the chassis of your car. So if you wanted to do this as a proper sort of design and make project from start to finish, learning how to draw in 3D is a really nice way of bringing this in as a context to learning a skill. So learning the skill of 3D drawing through doing a chassis and a body for an F1 in Schools car. So there's a couple of little sketch tutorials there. We've done a couple of videos which we will be adding to this as well, and Oscar's busy back at base doing various sort of assembly instruction videos for assembling the chassis, assembling the bodies, and also upgrading between a primary STEM project car. So remember we talked about the sort of internal classroom project version of this, which is the Denford primary STEM project. If you had one of those cars, how could you upgrade it to an F1 in Schools primary class competition car? And essentially that is the case of wider wheels, the housing for the CO2 canister at the back, and a couple of other little fixtures which just help it screw down to our track on race day. So there's a little video there just to explain that bit as well. Another place to look, if you wanted a bit more sort of wider context on F1 in Schools, I would just pre-watch these before you sort of share them with your teams, because some of them, well, the majority of them are all slanted towards the secondary competition, but there are some more kind of general setting up a team, how engineering judging works, enterprise, verbal presentation judging. They're sort of there as help resources, but like I say, more predominantly for the secondary competition. This is your place to go. We did put a slightly longer video together. You can see there 21 minutes of taking your students from the primary STEM project through that and into the primary class competition. So it may just be worth watching that as a bit of a background research task, just to go, right, okay, we get it now. We get all these terms that Mark's throwing about, trying to confuse us all. Okie dokie, right. I'll try and shut up for a minute here. If anyone's got a question, now is the time. You can either put your hand up through Zoom, you can either put your hand up on your video, or you can type a question into the chat. If anyone has got a question, now is the time. So please fire away. Delphine, you've got your hand up, but you've also got your sound on mute. If you want to unmute, then fire away.
Yeah. Am I on now? Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Just in relation to the broadcast event, you might not have all the details, I don't know, but one of the nice things from the secondary side, which would be nice here, is that seeing other teams, they learn quite a lot on the day.
Yeah.
From each other. How are we? Is there something that's going to allow that, or is just not going to happen this year, and that's just how it is? Do you see what I mean? Because it's really a nice part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It is something that is a challenge with virtual events. I won't lie. The ways that we're going to try and address it this year. So we had this issue with the F1 in Schools secondary national final, which you might remember from September. We did a little straw poll with teachers and just said who is happy to share their work as exemplar. Not everybody is, and ultimately I wouldn't want to force people to do that, but we'll do the same again and just see if and who is up for sharing their work as exemplar. What we'll do then is, for anybody who's said happy to share, I'll put a little shared folder together of documents which we can share around, and I guess you can at least use as teachers. For us during the event itself, what we'll try and do as best as we can is show off the cars that race, and we'll try and make the kids and the stars, the cars, the stars of the show on the broadcast. So while we probably won't broadcast the verbal presentations or sort of screen share the portfolios during the live event, we'll make the cars and the design and what the team have done as much as we can, we'll make that the stars of the show. And yeah, like I said, I think we'll try and do a bit of document good practice sharing after that with a bit of a shared folder.
Dependent of that because would there be a way for the teams to meet up, as in video meeting, to exchange things? And that this happens as well a lot, and it's quite nice when it's, but
yeah,
I don't mean sharing necessarily work, which you just explained, but actually just being able to talk to each other,
saying hello to each other. Yeah,
and say, oh, you've done this, what did you think of that, kind of thing.
It's something that's it's a challenge, and it's something that at the moment we don't. No, it's fine. It's a good question. We don't have an answer for it at the moment. What I would suggest is the one way that can happen is obviously when the broadcast goes live, there's a live chat feature on YouTube. So while it's not the ideal way of doing it, there is a way to interact with each other through the broadcast, as it were. In terms of a live face-to-face, that presents quite a lot of challenges, I guess, to get that many people in the same place at the same time. But it's something we're aware of and we're working on. I think there may just be a point this year where we have to accept that it's still a wish list thing. I mean, just to put a bit more detail on that, we run, of course, the F1 in Schools World Finals, as well as all these other wonderful things that we do. And part of the World Finals is integrating the teams together there. And believe me, the admin to get this to happen is enormous. So it may just be that it's one task too far to do this for the secondary and primary UK seasons this year. But yeah, there are ways that we can try and join people up. I know it does feel quite lonely, doesn't it, when you're used to the buzz of an event and being able to just pop into your next door neighbour's pit displays and have a look and speak to them. But we'll do what we can, Delphine. It's not a promise, but it's not a definite no. Anybody's got some two hands up. Excellent. Right. I didn't see you went there first. So Rich and Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to pick, because you're on the top of the pile. Sarah, go for it. I will ask you to unmute. You go for it.
Yeah, just really quickly, just two things. With the live final being on a Saturday, obviously all the kids are going to be back into their normal swing of sports, hopefully, and stuff like that. Then in terms of them tuning in, do you have timings for that or anything? I just thought it would have been easier for them to tune in on a school day. That's all.
Yeah, we've scheduled it for the Saturday at the moment, just because we've got a few other things going that week, and we didn't want to make sure. Well, we wanted to make sure that we had time to process things properly and release a video as we were happy with it. I mean, I'm prepared to adjust that. I think if we get enough people to say, look, actually Friday suits us better, then there is a potential to do it on Friday instead. I mean, the live show, the live release of the show as such is the release. We will be recording the show as live and then releasing it. So yeah, I think that's
okay.
Put out for question. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess a straw poll tonight. If anyone's got a strong opinion either way, drop it in the chat. Let us know whether you think Friday or Saturday would work better. We'll take that into account, definitely. We put it out there as a Saturday initially, and it seemed to go down well. But look, I'm always happy to be. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the kids being able to make it, that's all, and family commitments and stuff like that. Whereas actually, if they were in school, then the whole class/year group could all watch it together, and it'd be a bit more camaraderie. The other thing I was going to ask really quickly is, so we might be in a bit of an unusual position. I don't know if anyone else is in the same, but when we went into lockdown last year, we were obviously 2 weeks away from our regional final, and I had 4 teams in year 5 that were going into the regional final, who they're now in year 6, and we're really keen to let them actually do this so that they have a go and get to finish their work. They've done all their fundraising, they've literally done everything. Now obviously with the spec changing, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit, not much, but they've got loads of time. And I just wondered, is there a limit on the amount of teams that we can put forward per school? Because I know Tim allowed us an additional team after he came here and did the racing for us.
Cheeky.
I know. We sweet talked him, that's all.
He's a sucker for sweet talk, Tim. Yeah, that's the thing. Oh, if only I wasn't. I'm not going to say no. I think it would be in a year like this, it'd be pretty callous, obviously, to say definitely not. So I think certainly if you've got a situation like that, you might be one of only a few that have got that situation, Sarah. But I'd imagine there's probably more people out there who just missed regionals and have got the work. So yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you've got teams that want to enter this year that would have been this year's competition had last year's gone ahead, then I think that's fine. I think the main issue is making sure that your kids who are partway down the road already have got enough time to turn it around in, like you say, into the new spec. So that would be my concern.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't see that being a problem. Yeah, that's consider me sweet talked. Richard, go for it, mate. Yeah.
No, okay, so just a quick technical question, which was with the Jaguar Challenge last year, we were given digital files for the bodies to go over the top of the chassis. I just wondered if that was something that could be shared again, just because we can then look at if we can get it printed and cut. I know you can then get all the logos and things printed on top, which makes it a bit easier.
Was this yeah, cool. Okay. Was this a body? So this was a CAD net for the actual body surface, not for the chassis?
Yeah, so it's only like for the body surface. So it was like the example one, and then we just took that, we adapted that on the software into their own designs and how they thought about it. But it meant you could print it with all the logos and colours and things that the kids like to have on there.
Got you. Yep. It's not something we've got at the moment, but it's certainly something we can look into. I don't see an issue with it. The only slight asterisk there is obviously with things like the chassis going to being a manufactured item now instead of a 2D net. It is how to say this without it sounding really horrible. It's a bit more of a business decision as to whether things are given away for free as IP. I hope you can understand that, because it sounds horrible coming out of my mouth, but it may not just be as simple as saying, here you go, here's the CAD.
No, that was just the body. I was thinking. I mean, the chassis I can understand, but just that shell part, I suppose, really just to give them time. But otherwise, trying to think about that net from scratch is quite a challenge.
Like I said, that net is intended to just show visually kind of what a car with wings might look like. It's not that we want the kids to all come to an event with something that looks just like that with their own slight tweaks. It's there as a sort of a guide. But yeah, it's a good shout. And I'll instead of giving you an answer now, I'll look into it. I will make a note and I will pop something around to the group if we do manage to get something out there. So yeah, consider that an on the pile for debate.
Thank you.
It sounds reasonable, Richard. Anyway, I'm not arguing with you. Definitely.
Cheers. Thank you.
It's all right. Anyone else want to put their hand up? I've got I guess you can put your hands down now. You guys, I don't know how you do that on Zoom. Oh, lower hand. I'm going to do it for you, Sarah. There you go. If anyone else has got a question, go for it. I've seen Liz. You've asked a question. In fact, I'll just skip back up the list there. So, Michael, you asked, is the event live or pre-recorded? Yeah, it's going to be pre-recorded as live. We have got an incredible schedule around that time of year, and to do everything live is just going to be unmanageable. So it's going to be pre-recorded but as live. So it's going to be put together as much as possible like a live show, and then just released to the teams. So that's the answer to that one. How many teams do you have registered this year? It's an ongoing thing. At the moment, top of my head, I think we're just north of 50, 60 teams. But like I say, it's an ongoing thing. They could use the download of the old one to develop on Silhouette, perhaps. Yeah, good shout, Sarah. No reason why you couldn't start with an old body net. I think the body itself, in the nature of what it was, the only difference, I guess, to adapt the old body to the new chassis would be just to narrow the front section slightly. You could, of course, do that manually with a pair of scissors. You could mark off where it needed to be narrow and just cut a little slot in it to start shaping it to the new nose cone. But yep, that would be a good shout. Right, any more questions at this stage? I think that is looking like a tidy end. So, have I got anything after this slide? Yeah, I've got a next step slide. Excellent. So, from tonight onwards, if this is something you're thinking, right, cool, answered enough of my questions. Yes, he's waffled a lot, but I kind of get the gist of it. Register yourself at f1inschools.co.uk. That first registration just tells me you're in the hat, you're on the system, you'll get any emails from me, updates, changes to anything, which I will say now we're going to change as little as possible, because I think constantly changing things isn't helpful to anybody. But you'll just be in the hat for any updates and dates that you need to get things in by and reminders. So if you fancy it and you want to get involved, get your teams registered. That is just a sort of general school registration with a kind of commitment to how many teams you're going to put in the hat. Obviously, if you're Sarah and you're cheeky, you're going to put more than 5. Get yourself familiar with the new competition guidebook. We've put it on the website. I can share it with you after this on the email as well, but it's there. It's for you and your students to use. So please just have a read through it, get familiar with it. get in touch with Denford, get yourself your starter kits. The brand shiny new Denford web shop is now up and running. Well done to the people at Denford for getting that going, but there's a brand new web portal. Again, I'll share the link to that with you and just show you where the starter kits are that you need to get involved. So the next thing, I guess in terms of starting now, because you're still in this, and I cannot even imagine how you're doing this, having been a teacher myself, but teaching remotely, especially primary age kids, massive respect. I think you can probably start some of this now. I think in terms of your design activity, your research activities perhaps, and even putting teams together, thinking about who can do what in a team, if you haven't already got that sort of structure from last year. But ultimately, I guess you've got to think about this in terms of making them feel like it's their special extra project they're doing, and try not to feel like you've got to lead it every time. Get them excited about it, and that it's happening, and that the more they can do before you hit the ground running in school, the better prepared they're going to be. Ultimately, I am kind of now Tim. I mean, big shoes to fill. But yeah, Tim now sadly is no longer with the organisation. Missed him tons, but he's off doing many exciting things now, all over Instagram. But anyway, if you do need anything at all, that is why I'm here. So please ask me if there's any, even if it's, why on earth are you doing the event on Saturday? Why don't you do it on Friday? I'm here to be talked to, and I'm not going to try and be unreasonable. So just come to me with any questions or suggestions or anything at all. I completely accept we're at the start of this kind of new era, if you like, with the F1 in Schools primary class. So yeah, there's not going to be a brick wall from me. I guess the way to think about this as well is this can be kind of a bit of a positive beacon of hope for your students at this time in this year, that it's something to kind of bring people together with a bit and look forward to, a life after all this nonsense, and give them something extra to sort of get excited about. I mean, as a project in itself, to get to an event, even a regional or national event, can be pretty cool and exciting. But then from there onwards, if they were to carry on this journey in F1 in Schools, I mean, it can take them to some silly cool places. So yeah, think about it as using it as a sort of a hook to get your students back on and engaged and motivated, hopefully. And ultimately, I just want you to have fun with it. That's what we're here for. We're here to provide a way for you to have fun and help your students learn more around what you're trying to do with them anyway. So please, if you start to think this is getting stressful or too much, it shouldn't be about that. It's about getting going with it, doing your best, turning up with whatever you manage to produce, and just having fun and learning whatever you can from it. So like I say, we're here the whole time, myself predominantly, but the rest of the team behind me, and my colleagues Oscar and the rest of the Denford staff. So yeah, if there's anything that you need, questions at all, just come to us. That is pretty much the end of my ramble tonight. If anyone's got any questions still, I'm more than willing to sort of hang around for a bit. If people want to hang around and chat to me kind of behind, I guess after we stop the recording, you're more than welcome to. But if anyone's got anything now that they want to just ask in front of everybody so we have a chance to answer it, now is your time. I'll give you a mental countdown in my own head of 10 seconds. Who's going to put their hand up? Possibly nobody. Right, well, I'll tell you what, at this point, folks, I'll sign off, I'll stop the recording, and I'll hang around for probably another 15 minutes, just in case anybody's got a question they wanted to ask me off the recording, as it were. I'll send this back round tomorrow. I'll tidy it up a little bit. But yes, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's been lovely seeing so many people who have and who also haven't done the Jaguar Primary School Challenge before, so really excited. I hope it's useful, and I hope that I've answered some of your questions, if not all of them tonight. But like I said, we're always here. You've got my email address. Any questions, just ask. And yeah, I hope to see a lot of you very soon again. Thanks, folks.